Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And we're getting towards the end of Hitchcock's silent era as we dive into Champagne. And joining me is actor, filmmaker, Renaissance woman, Anna Campbell. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm so happy to see you again. This is so much
Yes.
fun. Thank you for asking me.
Of course. And I know we got to talk about your film and on my interview show earlier, back in the summer. And I appreciated that you enjoyed yourself enough that you wanted to come on to one of my other shows and, have a conversation about this, I think, unexpected Hitchcock film that's kind of you know, it's a romance
She
that's,
uh she does a very unique thing. I'm going to be really honest. You asked me to
uh,
be on it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes." And there was a handful of films that were available, and I picked this one purely for the title because
mhm,
I thought Champagne is fantastic and it's going to be so dramatic and so fabulous, and it's like basically the opposite of everything that I thought it could possibly be. So I'm very
there you
excited to
go.
delve into this nonsense.
Absolutely. And to give a little background here, so we have Champagne, which was released August 20th, 1928. This is a 90-minute film in its preserved version. It was very interesting because apparently BFI went back and restored all of his old silent films back in 2012. This is based on the original story by Walter C. Mycroft. Technical aspects were praised, but overall the film did poorly with critics. Not surprised. Even critics at the time weren't a huge fan of this film. And to be honest, I think this hasn't aged well in terms of like modern audiences going back and watching this.
I would
And
argue that, yes.
yep. And Hitchcock later admitted that the film had no story to tell. So
I
that's
don't know
not a
that
great not a great place to start.
not a great place to start. And it makes you wonder, and maybe you know more about this than I do, because I am very much looking at this from a filmmaker and a story perspective, and I'm not deeply researched on where he was at this point. Was he being assigned scripts? Was he picking things? He's still in England at the time, so this is
Yep.
before he really gets going.
So his first couple of films were with one studio, and then he jumped ship to a newer British studio that opened up. And I think there's a bit of a mix of like you
Mhm.
can tell some of these were not exactly like what he wanted to do, and
Yeah.
then some of them were very Hitchcock. Like
Yeah.
I'll be doing Blackmail in 2 episodes, which feels very Hitchcock. This does not at all. This honestly
No.
probably feels like the most least Hitchcock of the films that I've talked about so far, because he's had a couple other romances, but one of them involved boxing, and apparently he was a huge boxing fan from his
Okay.
teen years. And then one of them had like this crazy dark twist at the end. I'm like, I see some Hitchcock coming in here, and that didn't really happen here. But
No.
what Champagne is about, a spoiled heiress defies her father by running off to marry her lover. However, daddy has a few tricks up his sleeve. And I'm like, okay.
Yep.
But Anna, what were your general thoughts on the film?
Well, I really did find myself looking for Hitchcock in it. And,
Mhm.
the closest thing you can come to being like, oh, yes, there's the genius we all know and love is that there's some incredible camera work, right?
Yes.
Even at this point in time, he does a shot through the champagne glass and then is going to
Yes.
match it later to help wrap it up, right? He does some really funny stuff as he tilts the camera to make you feel like the ship is moving.
Mm.
Really he's able to capture movement with the camera in a way that most people don't. But other than that, it's unrecognizable from the things we know him the most for and the thing that
Yes.
we love him the absolute best for, which is the suspense aspect.
Mhm.
Although there is technically a twist, sort of, kind of barely at the end, it makes no sense. It just makes everything about the obnoxiousness of the plot of the film even worse somehow. And I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll get into that, but it really does just lack the sort of spark and magic. And somebody told me in my acting career that the two closest, that horror and comedy are actually the closest to each other
Mhm.
because both use the element of surprise to engage
Yeah.
the audience. And for someone who's a master at suspense and a master at, I'd say
Yeah.
suspense more than horror for sure. But that this does not hold like none of
Mm.
the enthusiasm that you have for adorable Betty Balfour, right? Can manage to make this story worth sitting through, let alone the twice that I sat through it to try to talk to you about it. So
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because this is actually the second time I watched this film because I do actually own this on it doesn't show up well because this is a very white cover on the camera, but this is an old Legends of Hollywood 12 movie pack that a very good friend of mine bought for me from an antique store and has 12 films on it, which a bunch of them are going to be like my next within my next 20 episodes, which I think the biggest name on here is Lady Vanishes,
yeah.
which not gonna lie, I also bought that on Criterion because like I want a nicer version because this is not remastered. These are old DVDs and they don't look great, to be honest. But this film, I remember watching for the first time and just being like, well, that was a movie. And it
Yeah.
didn't change the second time watching it, where it's just like, yes, you do have that champagne shot, which is great. And at one point, our main character's lover, he winds up getting seasick. And
Yeah.
you see like this distorted, like projecting on different layers of her because he's like, he can barely see straight. Those little things. And I think one of the most interesting things throughout the film is the way that Hitchcock looks at the man, the
Hmm.
stranger, played by Ferdinand von Alten, who keeps popping up this mustachioed man who's just like, who is this guy?
With the
And
most
the key,
fabulous actual name in the entire world, by the way. Like I mean, it's so good, right?
yes, that seems like a fake name of a mysterious man that you would wind up seeing on a ship at some point on a fancy cruise ship. And
Right?
here, the how the camera just captures this man being mysterious and is just like, okay,
He's got
where's
I
this
yeah.
going?
He's got eyebrow action. He's got the
Yep.
worst, like the most evil smirk. I found it really interesting. One of the things that sort of jarred me initially is technically you're introduced to our heiress first, right? Because, from what we think of as now as the modern classic storytelling standpoint,
Yeah.
she's introduced on the banner of the newspaper, but then the first character you actually meet on screen instead of just as a concept, on paper is this mustachioed man, and then he becomes very sort of unimportant but pivotal to anything happening in the damn thing.
Yep.
And you're sort of like, wait, okay, so is he the lead? But he's gross from the beginning. There's no confusion that this is not someone we're
Mm.
supposed to like. He's practically
Yep.
twirling the darn mustache. He's such an obvious like Lothario. And even when you think about what ends up happening at the end, are we allowed to spoil the ending in a 1928 film, I
Yeah,
suppose,
so
right?
I we do spoil
Yeah,
every movie on here
we're gonna
because
have
this
to. Yeah.
this is like a dive into it because like
Also, we're not recommending it. So,
no. Well, and to be frank, like not much happens in this movie. And like the two biggest things to well, I guess like one, her lover gets mad at her at one point and is like, we're done. And then it's revealed that the dad made up him losing all of his money to try to teach his daughter a lesson. And you're just like,
it's
okay.
from every feminist bone in my body. I was like, okay, so here's a flapper, right? Which is,
Yep.
remember, at this time, the symbol of feminine freedom, of the feminist
Mm,
manifesto, of we're changing everything. We're wearing our skirts right above the knee. I dare you to knock it. You can see our bodies. We're not even worried about the shape of our dresses. We're just out to play and party. This is made in England, so we're not in Prohibition era America, which would have been a different story
yeah.
entirely. So we're in the middle of Prohibition in America, sort of towards almost the tail end of it. But this is just, if this is taking place and being made in England, this is just a girl who's able to have fun. So she's a
Yeah.
wealthy heiress. Daddy is obviously paying for everything. And then at some point, daddy comes in and says, to punish her because she's effectively having too much fun. And by the way, she does like steal his airplane and sink it to get to her
Yeah.
boyfriend who's on a boat. Like, I'm not claiming like the best of behavior, but she is a delight and so much fun and so delicious to hang out with and to watch on screen that
Yeah.
the idea that these two morality sort of like policemen, both the father and the boyfriend eventually,
Yeah.
right, refuse to let this girl have fun. And it's so clear that these two men in her life in particular, but you'll also end up having the mysterious man ending up not just in the same category because he's being asked to do so because he ends up being in cahoots with the dad,
Yeah.
but you're sort of like, what are you doing putting up with these? And frustratingly for me, again, in the feminist manifesto world, right? She tries her best. The money gets lost, and she does
Yeah.
everything she can to take care of dad, to do the right thing. She's really bad at cooking because what heiress has ever been very good at making cookies? Like, there's a whole scene about
Yeah.
cookies and trying to like flip the bed and all of these. And he is actively getting in her, dad is actively getting in her way and being a jerk. And the boyfriend just never shows up to save her. And then they punish her by putting her in what she assumes is a very dangerous situation. I was also really fascinated by even so she takes a job at one point and she's in
Yeah.
the club and the mysterious mustachioed man happens to be in the club, or was that set up ahead of time? Now I don't think it's totally clear by the end of the
Yeah.
film. I think it was just happens, but I don't know. You tell me. Um, but there's a dream sequence where she imagines what would happen if she let herself be taken away with him. That
Hmm.
is like a full-fledged assault. And so she's like, no, 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 well, I can't do that. So it's like her first moment of sort of like, no, I can't go off with this. And then she goes off with him anyway and is locked in the cabin of his ship and has to be rescued by the morality policemen in her life. It's unpleasant. Like there is nothing fun about watching this vivacious thing be shut down over the course of 90 minutes of your life. It's not great. It's just not ideal.
Well, and that's the thing too, because Betty Balfour is by far the only like lively part of this movie. Besides, Hitchcock doing some fun things from a technical standpoint, but like she is the life of the party. She's
Yeah.
supposed to be. And I guess, yeah, if you take a step and really think about this, this whole entire movie is about snuffing that out.
Yes.
And it's just like, is that the message we should be going for
It
here?
it totally is. I'm going to take that one step further in just a bad storytelling perspective, right?
Mm,
She is a delight. I've said that 14 times. She really is. You understand why she was one of the stars of comedy, right? Just
yeah,
absolutely the top of her game at this moment in time, doing this movie for this still raw. I mean, The Pleasure Garden did really well, I guess, before it, and the
yeah,
and this is after The Lodger, which was a huge
mm,
success. So
yeah.
maybe it does make sense that she would be willing to work with this relative newcomer to the scene. But I think of Hitchcock as being a brilliant casting machine. I really
Mhm.
have always loved the performances. And because he's often playing with what's real and what's not, being able to choose actors who can play that duality and can bring something unique of themselves and leave you wondering and leave you guessing while giving a full-fledged performance. And although Betty's acting her tushy off, all of the men in it look like cardboard cutouts of ridiculousness, right? Just flat as a pancake. The boyfriend being the most annoying to me as a human
Mhm.
being. Like he just shows up and you're like, what do you see in this man? It's awful. The dad also just sort of stands there and is like, bad girl, bad girl, bad girl for the entire film, and you don't believe a moment of it, right? Like,
Well,
did you find that too?
and and that's the thing too, because the boy, as he's credited, is so uninteresting and not a nice guy either. He complains all the time. He is threatened by her, like living any kind of life. And he even like turns her back on her when she's down on her luck. It's just like, you're a scumbag. It's like,
Yeah.
why is she even with this guy? And
Yeah.
then you have this creepy the man who keeps popping up. And I guess in hindsight, he's watching her the whole time on purpose. He obviously is there to keep an eye on her. Like daddy, like she seems to be having the time of her life, and he's
Yeah.
like, nope, we need to stop this.
I gotta tell daddy. So I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong. So he happens to be on the boat but knows dad. So he sends the initial after she crashes the plane to get to her boyfriend, which is adorable, by the way. She
Yeah,
comes out, right? She comes
what an
out and it's so
entrance.
cute with she's worn the goggles, and so she's covered with dust, and she's got the most hilariously bad like makeup face on purpose because it just makes her that much more adorable. And they do this amazing scan, and he's one of the first people. We've already seen him, and there's a big hullabaloo, so he runs off, and that's one of the first people who sees her, and she catches him in the crowd. And then so I think that he doesn't know, correct, is this right? Like, he didn't know she was going to be there, but he's the first one who tells on her, and then from that point forward is basically sent to stalk her and act as a babysitter.
Yeah.
And but I will say one of the things that was fascinating to me, especially the second time through that I watched it, which I'm going to admit I did on 1.25 speed because this movie is also slow, like
For less
slow.
than 90 minutes, this is a slow time.
There's like several scenes that get downright boring, and we'll get to those in a second. But the first time you see the boy, he lights up the screen and he's super handsome. And it's this
Mhm.
thing, and there's not another shot of him that paints him in that light. From that point on, he becomes almost like mouse-like. He's got this really sharp nose and just like complains the entire way through. So
Yes.
that very first shot, I was like, "Look at that handsome dude! You've flown all the way through and smashed the plane for, and aren't you a delight? This could be." And but from that moment on, he says nothing. They don't seem to have any interests in common. He doesn't like her dancing. He doesn't like her drinking. He doesn't like, her having friends. Apparently, there's
Yeah.
a what's the scene where she's looking around the club, and she just gets excited and she starts to feel the music and she starts doing the like flap her hands, and he's like,
Yeah.
"How fucking dare you?"
Yeah.
Right? It's
Well,
so
and
painful.
then they at the end they save her from themselves because like the man has her in the cabin, but like her dad hired him to do that in the first place. So like, and then the first thing that the boy wants to do is get in a fight with the man. And it's just like, how about you like try to reconnect with the woman of your dreams? But no, it's just like, nope, I'm gonna defend her honor against a guy who was hired by my future father-in-law to just, keep an eye on her.
But I'm not,
And
does he not know? Like, why does he do that? Like, has he not been informed about what's actually
I
going
I
on?
don't think at that point, and that's what frustrates him because him
Yeah.
him and the him and the father are working in this on the same mission
Yeah.
and not communicating with each other,
Not communicating.
but then doing all the same kind of stuff.
Yes.
And you know, she does get a job, but then she's shamed for it because like, how dare you do this kind of job? I'm like, I'm trying to pay for like she's actually resourceful. She's trying to step up and take care of him, despite the
I think
fact
she
that
literally says that in one of our
yeah,
few title cards, because you told me that Hitchcock deliberately doesn't use. Tell me a little bit more about that, because you were the one who told me
yes.
that.
So now that I've watched all of his silent films, there's so many moments in his silent films where any other filmmaker would be sliding in these dialogue cards, but he valued so much the medium that we need to be able to speak through the visuals.
Yes.
It's the acting. And that's why, like, from what I've seen of the silent films, the acting is incredible. And he's using close ups a lot more than a lot of filmmakers. Like, sure,
Yep.
like in the 20s, close-ups weren't being used in that type of consistent way. We're just what 2 decades from where literally every single film was a stationary camera pointing at a wide shot and then everything just happening in front of it.
Yes.
And like I'm a humongous fan of Passion of Joan of Arc,
Mm.
and that film revolutionized how you can use a close up and how the actors can do so much with just their face. And you see
Yes.
that through all of these Hitchcock films where there's a lot of face acting. And you use that instead of spelling out all of the actions going on through that.
Again, to the credit of his casting. And
Yeah.
so I think one of the very few cards, if I remember correctly, has her saying something along the lines of, "I did this to help you." I
Yeah.
took a job to support you. And by the way, he's also shown up at this club and is having an expensive lunch after forcing her to attempt to bake, which is just not a skill she possesses. How
Yes.
could she, since she's never been, right, had to have any domestic traits whatsoever being taken care of, right? And I think that it's really painful to sit through them being on this punishment thing. And I think the thing that really drove me the most crazy, not to jump straight to the end, but even in this world where, oh, okay, finally they got together, like let's pretend this is the thing that we want for these people, which
Yeah.
it's not. It is not earned by this point. The
No.
very last thing they do is through the champagne glass again, get in a fight about who gets to be in charge. Him trying to put the woman back in her place. And I know it's the 1928 of it all. It's not like that's a surprising thing, but it's really not fun. And if I'm to guess, even at the time, in this moment of sort of feminine freedom and this moment of self-expression
Mm.
of the women of that era being exactly who this girl is portrayed as being, this had to be unpleasant. This had to be something that is one of the reasons that this was, I don't know if it was a financial flop, but it was a critical flop. And I think also just the audiences really didn't
Yeah.
respond to it at all, wasn't it? I didn't get the numbers on how well it financially did, but really,
Yeah.
really interesting to sort of look at it from a, yeah, this would be, it doesn't matter who you are, this is unappealing no matter what era it comes from,
Well, and if this story was structured where this man is a strong man and she's rebelling against that the whole entire time, maybe
Yeah,
that conflict of who's in charge would be more interesting. But the thing is, he's not strong. He is complaining
he's a
and
pansy. What a wet
childish
blanket.
the whole entire film. So then what's he think he's going to be in charge for? He doesn't have the money. He's
Yeah.
not the one that's this heiress. So she has the social capital over him.
Yep.
He has the personality over him. And never once has he shown any kind of strength throughout this whole entire film. So then what are we fighting over? Who's in charge here? It's like it's pretty clear who's in charge in this
It's clear who I
relationship.
want to have be in charge 100%. And I think I'm actually going to double down a little bit because it's the first time I've thought about it. But if what we end up loving Hitchcock for was his women put in impossible circumstances who somehow rise above, I mean, that is really
Yeah.
one of the tropes. I mean, he's got some pretty badass men put in some very strange situations too, but he does have this really consistent thing of the woman who figures things out and who goes beyond what anyone would have expected of her station,
Yeah.
certainly at that time. And maybe we can grasp onto this awesome woman who we've loved spending time with. What if she's the genesis of that? Just to some time, I'm
Yeah.
just looking for something to enjoy about it. She's the blonde, she's the right, she's the
Yeah.
fun one. We are rooting for her all the way, which is, I think, one of the reasons we end up so disappointed when she ends up in, oh, marriage, land. Okay, yeah, okay, right. Like nothing really changes for her. She just gets punished for existing.
Well, and this is obviously before films like, say, Gone with the Wind, where you have this very rich, spoiled woman who meets a man who she finds very alluring, but he's a very strong-willed man who's not just gonna like lay down to her status and stuff like that. And this isn't that. This is
No.
at every turn she is the strong one. And the fact that like them even trying to have an argument at the end, he's not winning this argument. Let's be real here. This marriage is certainly going to be her being in charge.
Oh, it's so doomed, and it just feels like, why wouldn't you want to let her, if the thing that you were attracted to about her was the freedom itself, was the power in her ability to make her own decisions in a world where women don't typically get to, right? It's interesting. What about for you, how for you was the scene where he walks into her party? So they've gotten to, let's see, which direction are they going? They're coming from America to England, but she meets them halfway there. So no, they end up in Paris, right?
Yes.
So she flies her plane to the boat that's headed to Paris from America, hence why the mustachioed man is on there because he's randomly American. I found myself going, "Oh, are we still the bad guys at this point in British filmmaking? That's fun."
There we go.
But I think that's mostly incidental. That's just me looking for something in it.
Yeah.
But right, so she lands and and the first time we see the boyfriend again, he's like avoided her for a week again in this sort of like bizarre punishment mode. And then
Mhm.
he shows up and she's having a raucous party and she's met all these people and she's having a blast and she's having a really good time. Sort of like my dogs in the other room who are wrestling. I hope you can't hear them too much, but like a
No,
delightful time. Everyone's having a delightful time. And he comes in and he's like, "What are you doing?"
wet blanket.
Like, oh. And she's like made up a new drink and she's got, and this was one of the most painful scenes I've ever seen is the trying on of clothes. Like, what is the fashion show? Why is that there, Shane? Like, what are we doing? Like,
Well, it's like, well, we have this gorgeous woman here. We're gonna flaunt her off for a little bit for the audience.
I did find myself going, oh my gosh, is that a naked back? Are we like, we must be not in the Hayes Act moment, of course, and
Well,
we're of
that's the
course
thing,
not.
because it's before the Hays Code, and also this is
Yeah,
a British film,
yeah.
so this
So
wasn't
all that
Hollywood.
there is a
So
naked back and a total hint of side boob in there. It's fantastic. It's really
yeah,
fun. But other than that, the scene like does not need to be there. She's simply trying on clothes, and she ends up as a joke putting on, a sort of a, well, I'm going to say schmata, right? Like a very dour, drab dress,
Hmm.
and as to show off. Now this one's fabulous, just to see what everybody says, and letting herself be made fun of, which is the moment that Dad comes in and says, "We've lost everything. You better get used to dressing like this." And there's one just beautiful thing that she does during that scene. She tries to then go back into the party and like pull it off. And again, by the way, this whole sequence is too long, super boring,
Yes,
does not work. But Balfour, am I saying it right? Yeah, Balfour. She does this thing where once the dress is now defining her instead
yeah,
of a fun choice that she's made, she starts to really uncomfortably do this psychological gesture of pulling on the collar and not knowing how to stand in it because now she can't get it off. And it's
yeah.
really painful to watch. It's really a beautiful acting moment. And, again, in that sort of we can't use words. So, what's the gesture that indicates, wow, suddenly everything's changed and I'm feeling trapped and I don't know how to be anymore? I
Mhm.
thought that was a lovely beat within an otherwise completely useless scene. Like,
Well, and that certainly does reinforce this whole entire situation that she finds herself in. And it is an interesting combination of acting and visual storytelling to be like,
yeah,
at one moment, she's having some fun in it, but now that this is her reality, she's finding the discomfort in it. And it's like, "Eh, this doesn't sit right on me."
yeah.
And what's interesting, going back to a point that you made about like, look at all the things why you fell in love with such a woman and then you want to snuff them all out. It's so interesting because we were talking before we started recording this that about some of the other filmmakers I've covered, and one of the recurring tropes that I noticed in a lot of John Wayne, John Ford films is that very thing, is where
Mm,
John Wayne falls in love with this fiery woman who's strong, but and he loves that about her. But at the end of the day, I'm still the man in the relationship and I need to like put you in your place a little bit. Very much the quiet man, or I think it was Donovan's Reef, I think that also happened in.
sure, sure.
And I'm sitting there thinking like, and here's the difference between those stories and this one. John Wayne was always made to be a big, strong figure in a film.
Yeah,
That's not this situation, and why so much of this doesn't ring true. Because, like, if this was a John Wayne type, the boy, who I certainly would they would not have credited as the boy if it was John Wayne,
totally.
is a very strong character, and Jean Braden, who plays this character so small
Yeah.
and not powerful, when he tries to like beat her down into like, this is how you need to be because we're getting married and I'm going to be the husband and you're going to be the wife, it's just like none of that rings true. And
No.
like I don't know what it's trying to go for. I don't know if like it's like, well, we need to lean into what people should be doing in marriages at this point, but then it doesn't make any sense for the actual dynamic of these characters. It just felt like this is what we need to do because
Yeah.
this is what society dictates, instead of being true to the characters of the story. And that's not good writing. That's not good
Right.
screenwriting in terms of following through with characters. And if you struggle to follow through with who
Yeah.
your characters are by the end, that ending's not going to be satisfying. And this
Yeah.
ending isn't satisfying.
I even find myself wondering if then maybe Betty Balfour's not the right person for it because she's so likable. If she was somehow over the top or like destructive or hurting other people along the way, and we needed to rein her in. Look, I'm still not going to stand for this as being like a suggested storyline here.
Mm.
But I think it would have been easier for us to want something to change. But I agree with you, the performance from the boy, and you're right, I hadn't even put into my head how annoying it is. They don't have names, first of all, so
Yeah.
that paints it even more painfully as a bizarre morality tale, right?
Mhm.
But since we don't like the people who are doing the teaching, there's no room for us to go, oh, thank goodness she got her comeuppance. uh, and I think that that might be a huge part of it, is just these are underdeveloped characters. Like
Yes.
they are caricatures, almost in commedia dell'arte like level, like blankness,
Yep.
except for her.
Hmm.
So, we end up going, first of all, we stay in the same sort of emotional register of she's being buoyant and fabulous and trying
Yeah.
really hard and having all these big feelings, and the men are going, stop that, stop that,
Stop it.
stop it, stop it. But with like, there's no build.
Hmm.
And yeah, again, if we're going to go into what did Hitchcock want and what is he going to end up doing really well, it's going to be right the same. We need to have the thing happen at the end, but this just doesn't earn it. It doesn't. There's not enough beats to even get to. Oh, I should have seen that coming. You couldn't have figured that out even if you wanted to. This is pre-MacGuffin, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and I didn't expect to, bring up Gone with the Wind multiple times in this episode talking about this.
go for it. Do
But
it.
like when Rhett's like, quite frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. We like that moment because she does need to get put in her place. She's
Yeah.
not exactly the most likable person.
Yeah.
And she has to go through this whole entire journey over, almost 4 hours. But
So many hours. Great film.
what are
Great film.
what
Lots of
are
hours.
what are we supposed to not like about the girl except that she's free spirited and just enjoying the life that she has? And it's just
Yeah.
like, is that what we're trying to say here?
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
you're right.
based off of the story, like the fact that the father feels like he needs to teach her a lesson, put her in her place. And the fact that this whole entire and then the husband, the soon to be husband, the boy tries to put her in her place. I don't know. It just strange vibes. The
Strange
thematic work
vibes.
here does not like it probably ages the worst out of anything about this movie because the
Yeah.
watchability of this film aged very poorly because there's meandering. There's no pulse of narrative thrust or any type of energy about how this film is structured. And then on top of that, the thematic elements of this just seem so weird and off-putting that the fact that it's just like, oh shucks, at the end where it's just like my dad put me through all of this stuff and I need to go through this journey. It's just like, no.
Um,
Honestly, she's a much better person than anybody because at least when she was put in a supposedly put in a situation where she really needed to, buckle
rise to the
down and
occasion.
like
Yeah.
rise to the occasion. He does. Nobody else does.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, to your point, right? Look, if Scarlett O'Hara's comeuppance is the death of pride, right? Which is it's actually a beautiful thing to watch, right? Someone who's
Mm.
come from everything, ends up with nothing, who somehow still deserves love at the end of it. I mean, it's a there's some paternalistic nonsense going on in that film too,
Yeah.
obviously. But I'll take it, right? Like
Yeah.
let's teach someone to be a better person and to respect themselves for the things they do have to do and earn it. Okay, like loosely, I'll give it to her. But this, you're absolutely right. People are just lying to this girl, and we
Yeah.
know it. I
Yes.
wonder if the film would have been somewhat better, and I still think that all of the other things would have needed some adjustment too, if instead of having, right, because we know as soon, so the dad comes in, he's like, we lost everything, it's terrible. We go to this garret apartment where He's doing weird calisthenic exercises while she cooks for him and cleans for him. He's deliberately getting in her way so she can't change the bedclothes for the bed he's clearly sleeping in. Like she is serving him hand and foot while he's being a dick.
Mhm.
Right. But then the very next thing we see is him having a fancy ass lunch being served by 14 waiters. So
Yep.
there's no confusion on our part that this is something that is deserved. It might have been infinitely better to just cut that scene, right? To
Yeah.
have it be that instead we watch her as she goes out and figures it out and brings to her father and protects her. And even if he does come back in, right, she can still think she's doing the right thing. But we know he's just being mean for the
Yeah.
sake of smacking her around. And I think that that makes it that much way harder for us to see what happens at all because we're like, okay, when is she going to find out that she still got millions and right that this was all just for fun or something? It's not fun. That's sort of exactly the problem. Yeah.
I don't like the idea of like rewriting movies while critiquing them because
Yeah.
it's like this wasn't my story to tell. I didn't come up with this. This would have been so much more satisfying if she realized in the end, after all these lies, she didn't need any of this
Yeah.
and that she can make it on her own. And she
Right.
just leaves all three of them behind
Yeah.
and goes on and lives her own
Steal
life.
another plane. Just steal another plane. That would be fantastic. You're so
Yeah.
right. And I totally agree with you. We have to take it for what it is. But this one has such a and maybe it even comes down to I found myself after the first watching being like, what did I just see? Like what because you're looking for what's the thing we're going to explore here? What's the theme? What is the excitement? And I know it's just a rom-com and I know it's like a comedy and it's silly and there's a lot of beautiful like fun sort of, delightful moments in it. But you still need to know what it is that these people need to learn. She don't need to learn any of this. Right? Like
And
it's
she
not
didn't
what
learn
we're doing.
anything.
And she doesn't. Yeah.
She learned that she can support herself,
Yes.
and then the film decides that's not something she needs to show anymore,
Oh,
and then she just goes right back to
yeah.
where she was. So at the end of the day, who learned anything and grew from it, or who she learned something and then was shown that it wasn't important enough to live by, and
Yes.
then none of the men in this movie learn anything.
They
So
not only don't learn anything, they are totally justified in everything they do. And again, maybe if you and I in our modern worldview, even in the crazy world in which we find ourselves right this moment,
yeah,
must take a step back and look at it from a cultural perspective. But I do think that because this was 1928, and right, feminism was a thing. That it's really interesting that this one in particular seems to go, no, no, no fun shall be had, instead of let's celebrate the boldness of, the blonde woman that Hitchcock will become obsessed with for the
yeah.
entire rest of his career. Like, even if we just archetype the crap out of the one character we did have any attachment to, then she should get to be the one who somehow wins. And I don't think that she does, like at all.
You know,
Poor
Betty
thing.
Balfour walked in this movie. So Grace Kelly and Kim
Yes,
Novak and so many others could run in a Hitchcock
absolutely.
film at some point later. So,
Absolutely. And by the way, like let's give Hitchcock a really big round of applause for being able to use comedy in tension-filled films. Like he's
yeah.
actually incredible at making us laugh to relieve the tension, which then makes it
Mm.
that much worse when he makes us all tense again. He truly is able to build it up, and comedy was always one of the major parts of that for him that he does so much better than anybody else. And so maybe we're just seeing the one time he got to play with that exclusively, but he really struggles with it. And he knows it. I mean, he knows it, the critics know it, audiences everywhere know it. And, it's just a really interesting moment in what is otherwise a pretty spectacular career. This coming after The Lodger really kind of blew my mind in a way. The only other thing that I was like, oh, I wonder, I was reading in the tiny little bit that I read, and I'm not as researched as you are on this, but that it was they think that the print that they were restoring, correct me if I'm wrong, was a second copy, right? It was the second print or the one that traveled or something like that. So they're not 100% positive that it's precisely the way the exact original film would have been, whether they were still shooting the two cameras or whether they were still, I think we're past that point at this point, but but they had to work with what they had.
Yeah.
And even in the article that I was reading about that restoration, they were like, do we have these scenes are long, right? Like they're holding way too long. Is this really what they meant? But you can't change the thing that does
Yeah.
remain of the thing that you have. So I don't know. Maybe you can't, yeah, we can't change it, but maybe we
Well,
could give them a little grace and go, we don't know exactly for sure that this was
and
what
there's a
was
lot of
intended.
inconsistencies about the lengths of a lot of his early films.
Mm,
Because some of them, it's like this was restored at 150 minutes, but then I had a 2 hour, 9 minute cut that I watched
yeah,
on Amazon. And I'm like, where'd the other 19 minutes come from? It
yeah,
shouldn't have. It should have been cut out. That was my response to that particular one. The
yeah.
Farmer's Wife, which was a 2 hour, 9 minute movie that felt probably 40 minutes too long. But like,
Interminable. I did not rewatch that one.
it's one of those types of things where it's so challenging going back and watching these. And like some of my favorite films from this era, like I'm a huge fan of Metropolis. There's
Yeah,
whole sections of that film that are just missing, and it's just an insert of text. It's like, this is what, from what we know, this is what's supposed to happen in this scene.
yeah,
And that's always a challenging thing
yeah.
because I could only imagine, obviously, the Martin Scorseses of the world who are keeping film restoration alive in the way that
Bless
it is.
them. Yes.
Just imagine if people thought about that beforehand back then, and you wouldn't have so many lost films
Yes.
and all of these things. But like, we do our best with what we have. And if this is the champagne that was showed at the time, I'm not surprised this wasn't a big hit with people
Yeah.
because it doesn't feel right. And
Yeah.
one point that I wanted to bring up, and I think this builds off of what you said, two things, and these are kind of like the last two um thoughts that I have to throw out there. You brought up how important Hitchcock's casting is.
Yeah.
And I think it plays off so well, and why he's able to find humor is he finds humor in the characters and the performances
Yes.
and not trying to be ha ha funny.
Yes.
And that's why you get a Jimmy Stewart who
Yeah.
can slip that charm in.
And Cary
And why,
Grant. Yes. Yeah.
yep, absolutely. And those are the performers that can make it happen on
Yes.
screen and inject those moments of levity.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that this is a full-blown comedy. And The Farmer's Wife, also a full-blown comedy,
Mm.
are two that I did not like
Yeah.
out of these early ones. Maybe Hitchcock just wasn't a filmmaker that could just do straight comedy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because he wouldn't be the first one that I've covered on this show that is criticized for that. And Steven Spielberg is criticized for the same thing
Yeah.
because his main, I'm going to do a full blown comedy is 1941, and that is not it.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
all of his other films, they find the humor in Harrison Ford's very charismatic as Indiana Jones, and he makes moments funny.
Yes.
And you find that, and that's an interesting thing that, like, I joke, like, I don't think I could be a comedian or anything like that. I'm not that type of person that is can always be funny. I have
Yeah.
my moments, and I can find moments in places to be
Yeah.
fun. And like, I love telling stories, and the things that I'm gravitated to, the ideas that I have in my head, very few of them are comedic.
Agreed. Agreed.
And that's not everybody's bag. Not everybody can do comedy in that kind of way. And then this kind of just screams to me that, like, this probably isn't what Hitchcock should be doing.
Oh yeah.
And then we have decades of hindsight knowing what Hitchcock should be doing, and he did
Yes.
it amazing.
Yes. And I tried very hard to go into this movie and be like, oh, a Hitchcock comedy, let's
Yeah.
go. And it just doesn't work. Like, we're not just being jerks because this is outside of his genre. I believe that the people who are the best at straight comedy, right? And everybody else you mentioned where comedy comes into it and is a part of it, you're really laughing at the person through a human foible, right?
Yeah.
It's not comedy for the sake of comedy. The people who are truly the incredible comedians in our generation and before are surviving their trauma by laughing at it and refusing to
Mm.
be afraid of it. From everything that I've read about Hitchcock's early life, everything was scary, right? He
Mhm.
everything was tense, money was always tight. They had to move a bunch of times. He described in one article I read his early family life as strictly disciplinarian or something along. I'm not that's not a direct quote, right? But he seems to approach it with trepidation. And
Yeah.
you can't do comedy if you're trepidatious. You got to launch yourself right in and just be
Mm.
like, I don't know, guys, let's just see what the heck happens. But I'm very much the same. I am definitely the places where I'm the funniest are the places where I'm willing to laugh at myself, but I can't do it so exclusively, right? And I think that that's what we see here. This is not a person who wants to laugh at all of humanity to make it all seem okay. This is a person who is genuinely a little bit terrified that
Yeah.
humanity is going to turn around and do humanity all over again, right? So
Well,
I think you're
and
right.
we see that in The Lodger,
Yeah.
Blackmail, Murder, and a laundry list of other films that I'm gonna get the pleasure of going through on this journey. And it's so funny because I even recently, before I even started my series, watched even some of his last couple of films, and he
Hmm.
still had it in the tank
Yeah.
all the way up until the 70s,
Oh, yeah.
which is
Yeah.
wild to me.
That's true.
But
He doesn't fall apart. He doesn't have, he gets better and better and better and better and better and kind of, he grows with the medium in such an incredible way. One of the things that I found in watching, so I did Pleasure Garden and I did The
yeah,
Lodger, went to Champagne and then jumped to a couple of later ones, but The Rope and then, because that was one I hadn't
yes,
seen and then kind of, trying to remember the ones that I'd just seen because I'm not an idiot, right? And the really interesting thing to me in the pleasure garden is you're still watching someone who's capturing the play, right? It literally, I
yes,
believe, was an actual play. And the rope kind of goes back to that in a way
yes.
where you see his ability to take something that was genuinely intended for the stage and bring it to a much wider audience and interpret it in a way that a camera can. This one doesn't have that. It's got too many set pieces. It's got too many other places that it goes. And so the camera work and the storytelling, which is the thing, and even the lodger, I don't think would function. It only works as a movie. You need what's that? There's that weird moment where the faces all go in and out, and like there's some really
Yeah.
incredible camera work that you sort of can't believe exists at this early a moment in cinema history. And he does some innovative things in this one, but it's just not going to end up being the part of the medium that he's going to excel at. So again, we're flat.
Well, and it's very interesting because I'm wrapping up my first 10 films of Hitchcock, and there's going to be six chunks of that because I'm going to be
Yeah.
doing 60 weeks of that.
So many movies, this man.
Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho, and The Birds are all within his last 10 films.
Jeez. Can
So,
you
like,
believe it?
this is like, that was like the tail end of his career, comparatively, and a lot of those are it's late 50s into the 60s,
Uh-huh.
and then he started more sporadically making films every 3 4 years
Well,
up
everybody did because
until
that was studio collapse time, right? I mean, at that point, he's like, "How the heck do we get these made anymore?" Right?
it's like we're not making five of these a year anymore.
Can't do it.
um which is so interesting because like there was times where I was like John Ford had like six films in a year, and I'm just like, and even more because if it weren't for Lost Films, my John Ford series would have been 120 weeks.
Wow. It's
He had
so many.
40 Lost Films, but he had been making films since the 19 teens.
It's incredible.
Hitchcock came in right at the tail end of silent era of filmmaking.
But
And
within the
then,
studios, right? Like
correct.
he started working in smaller capacities. Is that right? Do I have that correct?
Yeah, so and he built up to like he made these studio contracts and was
Yeah.
making these films. But Campaign is such an interesting just piece looking at the
Yeah.
grander scheme of what Hitchcock was doing. And you know, not everybody you make 60 films, not all of them are going to be a winner. And
How? Yeah, how grateful are we that nobody watched this absolute dud of a film and went, "Oh no, that guy." I was thinking about this as, I've made a single film and I can't wait to make my next one. It's much harder today, right, to get to your second film than it
Yeah.
was at the time that you were working in a system that was churning out what we would now call content to get it to the masses, right? This was such an
Mhm.
amazing new economic opportunity and entertainment, source. And he turns it into an art form in a way that probably isn't totally necessary, right, for what was expected of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Blackmail came out 11 months after this.
Oh my gosh, it's so fast.
And there was another movie in between there. So
Yeah. Yeah. You got
even
you
just,
got work you got your work cut out for you, my friend.
and I'm excited about this one because it'll be an interesting journey.
Yeah.
Um, and I just got to wrap up two of my favorite filmmakers with Wes Anderson and Hayao Miyazaki, which were much more like condensed.
Yeah.
So I got a little bit of a break
Yeah.
from doing these marathon long series, but Anna, it was such a pleasure having you come on and getting an opportunity to chat a film with you.
I'm so honored that you asked me, even if I picked a movie based on the title alone, and that was what happened, right? Like, I would do it any old time and throw me the weird ones. I love being able to look at a filmmaker we adore today, even when it's not their best piece of work. It teaches us so much, and it's so fun to talk about with you.
Absolutely. And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.